Dear Rewind Reviewer, we regret to inform you that you have not been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. As you are no longer of school age, and the small matter of you also being a muggle, you are ineligible for a place here. If you were to consider a teaching position, then perhaps Muggle studies would be best suited for you, but you may struggle to get to the castle due to the number of Muggle repellent spells surrounding the grounds. We hope you can understand and wish you all the best. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. How you doing, guys? Welcome back to Rewind Reviews. Today we're going back to 2001 to look back on a movie that honestly was a huge part of my childhood growing up. And that movie is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Based on the first instalment of J.K. Rowling's Boy Wizard series, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, depending on where you live, was directed by Chris Columbus and adapted for screen by Steve Kloves. The story sees an orphan boy enrolling in a school of wizardry, where he learns the truth about himself, his family, and the terrible evil that haunts the magical world. The movie stars Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, Emma Watson, Richard Harris, Maggie Smith, Robbie Coltrane, Alan Rickman, Fiona Shaw, Harry Melling, Tom Felton, Richard Griffiths, Warwick Davis, Vern Troyer, John Hurt, and Ian Hart. So yes, as you've probably gathered, I am actually part of the generation that basically grew up with these movies. This was like one of the big franchises that was around during like our teenage years, especially with the first movie that came out in 2001. I wasn't actually old enough to go and see it in the cinema. It wasn't something that I was really sort of familiar with. I sort of heard about it a little bit. A TV channel that I used to watch called CBBC, and one of the things that they had on it was Newsround and Blue Peter, and they always had like all these little things, and they were talking about this brand new movie that was based on this book series that was coming out. They kept advertising it, and I kept seeing like these clips of like this young kid in glasses with like this gigantic hat on his head, and it's moving and talking, and it was just something that really got me interested. I was really curious to see what it was that this movie was going to be. Eventually, when I actually did get around to seeing it, it was out on DVD, and quite simply I was a fan ever since. As I said, I wasn't able to go and see this one in the cinema when it first came out. The first one I did see in cinemas was Chamber of Secrets, but with the 20th anniversary that had came during like the lockdown of 2020, cinemas were actually starting to put on a load of older movies to try and entice people to go back to the cinema. And one of the things that they did was a running of all 8 Harry Potter movies. So I thought, well, they're showing the first one, so let's go and do it. So nowadays I can officially say I've seen all of them on the cinema. And in the wise words of Eric Morecambe, not necessarily in the right order. But just before I move on, I do need to say that yes, I am somebody who has read all 7 books, and there is a very strong chance that I will end up comparing the books and the film at some point. So just in case that does happen, I'm going to put up a little counter in the corner right here. So that's going to keep you up to date on every single time that I say that. So let's get on with the review. So starting off with the cast. This movie mainly focuses on a lot of newcomers. Well, not necessarily newcomers as such. They have done a few little things prior to this movie, but this was like the big thing that really got them noticed. And when it comes to a lot of the central characters like Harry, Ron, Hermione, Draco, Neville, they are all pretty well cast. There are definitely issues with a few of them because, yeah, ranging from experience, and I don't know whether it might have been because of the way that they had to do the ADR. I don't know how much ADR was really sort of had to be used in this one, but there are definitely elements that I think that they definitely could improve on, and that is something that they do improve on in the future. But for this one, they're fine. They do a really good job in their roles. You do believe these characters, you do believe their friendship and their connection. They are really good. The strongest out of the kids for me is Tom Felton and Rupert Grint, because they are brilliant in these roles. I love how they are able to sort of capture who these characters are. This is kind of like the best version of Ron that we've actually got, because he isn't necessarily just like a coward as they sort of like pushed him to be in the future movies. He does stand by his friends. There is definitely a lot of conflict here and there. But then when it comes to like Tom Felton as Draco, you just hate him. and he's brilliant in the role. And honestly, I'm surprised that he actually auditioned to play Harry, because I think he could have done a good job, but I think we really would have missed out on something great, because he is absolutely fantastic as Draco. But I do have to admit that unfortunately the weakest out of the main characters for me is Daniel Radcliffe, and even he himself has said this. He's not the strongest when it comes to the performance. I don't quite know what it is, but he is good. He does do a good job with this, and I said in the future he really starts to find his footing. In this one he is fine, he is very passable, he's very good with this character, and I really do like that they did get him for this role. I've also got to sort of admire the dedication, because apparently they were going to try doing green contact lenses to make him a bit more accurate to how he is in the books, but honestly it's not something that you'd even really sort of notice, so I don't really know why they even sort of tried it. I don't think anyone really sort of cares about that. But the wisest decision that the casting department actually made for this movie is the more veteran actors, the people who've been around for a long time, and they make up pretty much most of the adult cast in this movie. Every single person is absolutely fantastic. I love what they're able to do with their characters. The casting is spot on with every single person. Even though you're supposed to absolutely hate them, the Dursleys, the actors are absolutely brilliant. I do really enjoy the sequences with the Dursleys. I think one thing that they really do sort of capture is that it's not necessarily a case of, oh, they're just like these horrible people and that's really it. There are definitely layers to it, there are sort of reasons behind it, there is definitely a lot of prejudice that is included in here, and it works, and the performances that they give are absolutely phenomenal. When they were casting Hagrid for this movie, I believe J.K. Rowling actually said that she'd always pictured Robbie Coltrane in this role, and apparently that's who she sort of based him on. I'm not sure how true that is, but you can tell because he's absolutely incredible. I absolutely love Hagrid in this film. Robbie Coltrane is brilliant, and the way that they bring him to life is fantastic. Plus we also have the legend of Alan Rickman in this movie playing Severus Snape. Alan Rickman, this is the first time I've really sort of talked about him on this channel. Honestly, he's one of my favourite actors, one of my all-time favourite actors, and this was the movie that introduced me to him. I absolutely love him in this role. I love that you're never quite sure what side he's on, and it's something that plays out throughout all the movies. It's absolutely brilliant. I'm actually surprised that he actually originally sort of turned this role down, but because of he actually was allowed to sort of know where ultimately the character was going to go in the future, so that's the thing that kept him on. And he is phenomenal as Snape. I absolutely love him as this character. It's a very different performance than necessarily what we would have gotten if it was just a page to screen adaptation, because Snape is kind of just a horrible guy, just like greasy hair, and he's always got that sort of smile. But the way that Alan Rickman sort of plays him, it definitely makes him a bit more human, makes him a bit more grounded, and you can definitely see what it is that really sort of attracted him to this role, especially with the future instalments. I do need to very quickly say that unlike a lot of the other reviews that I've been doing recently, this is going to contain a few spoilers for the plot of this movie. I'm not going to be going into detail about any of the future ones. When I get around to doing those movies, I will go into the spoilers for those films, but until then, they don't exist right now. It's just this one, and yes, there will be spoilers throughout this review. I think Ian Hart gives quite an underrated performance in this movie because he's technically got to do like 2 roles, and I think that the way that he's able to do both of them is really good. Like he's like, I suppose, like a cowardly, stuttering guy quite early on in the movie, but then you start seeing like there's a lot darker side to him, and he's actually quite frightening, especially for a kid. You know, I was quite young when I saw this movie, and he is quite a threatening character, and I really do like how they approach that performance. I love how they sort of handle his character. Again, I actually saw the movie before I read the book, so I wasn't aware of what was going on with Quirrell. It really is a bit of a surprise, and it is great if you are rewatching this movie because there's so many little hints about where this is going, and it really pays off very well, and his performance really sells it. And then when it comes to Richard Harris, who this is the first of 2 appearances that he makes as Albus Dumbledore, and I know there's going to be some people who disagree with me with this. To me, this is what Dumbledore was. To me, this is kind of what I've always kind of pictured whenever I've read the books. This is what he should be. He's this elderly, this wise figure who's got this great sort of wisdom, and he's got this really soft way of speaking. I absolutely love Richard Harris in this role, and it is a real shame that we never got to see much more of this version of the character. I think he definitely would have handled that bit in Goblet of Fire a bit better. Also, I think this is one of the first times that I ever saw Warwick Davis in any. I mean, he was in Star Wars, but I think this was like the first time I was sort of aware of him. And he plays like 5 different roles in this, because he plays Flitwick the Professor, he plays Griphook the Goblin, he voices one of the other goblins. I'm quite amazed how many roles he actually does play in these films. Did he get paid extra? He should have. The entirety of the cast is absolutely phenomenal in this movie. As I said, some of the younger performers, there definitely is a lot of room for them to grow, and there is definitely a lot of experience that they can get through these movies. But overall, everybody is great, and I really do love the casting. This movie is just over 2.5 hours long. It's pretty accurate to the book. The story for the first movie is very simple. It's just kind of establishing everything that happens, not only within the Wizarding world, but Harry, Ron, Hermione, the life at Hogwarts, kind of the lives that everyone's sort of going to have. And there is a lot going on. This is a very exposition heavy movie. It spans an entire year, so there's a lot of different things that we see throughout the film. It's all handled very well. It would be very easy for this movie to come across as quite dull because of just how much information that we are given throughout this movie, because of things at Diagon Alley, for quidditch, for all the different lessons that they've got, as well as all the spells, plus the main plot of the movie with Harry and his friends looking for the Philosopher's Stone. But it's all done in a very organic way because they are attending a school. That sort of gives them the excuse to kind of explain everything to not only the characters but the audience as well, so that we are aware of how this world works. And even though there is a lot of information, this is still geared towards families, and this is something that I feel like everyone can watch, enjoy and understand. It's kind of funny actually mentioning the spell casting in this movie, because little trivia fact for you which you might not have actually noticed, Harry never actually casts a single spell in this film. That's kind of shocking considering his name is in the title. This is the first movie of the franchise, and this is by far the lightest of the lot. This is definitely one of the more family friendly additions to this franchise. There is a real great sense of fun. I love seeing the kids just kind of being kids, whether all sort of like pranking each other or just like doing like trading cards, bickering over sweets and all sorts. This does feel like a movie that really does capture what kids do, even right down to like all the different spells that they have, because I don't know any kids who, after they've watched this movie, won't be going around with the wands and shouting, you know, all the different spells. And that is quite a clever thing that is incorporated into not only into the franchise, because a lot of the spells are kind of based on like Latin and different languages, so that they do sort of sound like what it is that they are supposed to do, like Wingardium Leviosa, levitate, and Expelliarmus, disarmament. They all do sort of connect with what it is that the spell actually does in some way, and it kind of sort of gives a few little clues to not only what the spells can do, but like names and all sorts as well, because like characters are sort of, character names come from like gods and like different bits of mythology and all sorts, which is all sort of integrated into this movie. It's also quite a funny movie. There's quite a lot of comedy that is injected into here, and this is something that's kind of continued with each movie. And the comedy is really funny. I do like a lot of the jokes and little subtle gags that they have, and like a few of the little pranks and things that they get up to. It is really funny, and I think this is something that I think everyone will enjoy. That being said, like how it sort of goes on in the future, this movie does have a few darker elements. There are definitely moments where it sort of turns into like a horror movie, but it's kept very tame. This is still oriented more towards kids rather than a bit more grown up, as like Half-Blood Prince and onwards basically did. Those sequences are handled really well. They're not too intense, but just enough to give you a bit of a fright. I definitely remember getting a bit freaked out when I was really young, especially the sequence in the forest. I never liked. I don't know what it was, whether it was the hooded figure, whether it was what it was doing, whether it was just the atmosphere, the music. I'm not quite sure, but that scene definitely freaked me out when I was younger. Plus that darkness really does sort of give this movie a lot more weight to it, because this could have been just a really nice, fun, family friendly movie. But because of like Harry's backstory, what happened to his parents, how he gets the lightning bolt scar, all the stuff with Voldemort coming back and all those elements, as well as the family story as well. It really does ground it. It does give it this emotional backbone that really does sell this as something else. That's why it works so well. That sequence where Harry's looking into the Mirror of Erised and he sees his parents, and it's like the first time that he's properly seen them. It is quite emotional, it is sad, it is handled really well, and that's one of the few times that I genuinely will say that Daniel Radcliffe is absolutely brilliant in this role. I love the casting of the parents as well, and they are able to bring enough to the characters and you don't really sort of see them that much. It really does add weight to this film. When it comes to the sets and locations, I think that how they've brought not only a few of the buildings and all sorts to life, I think that the entire worlds, the wizarding worlds sort of inhabit, it is very well realised. I love how they've brought Hogwarts to life. I love how Diagon Alley looks and feels, the way that they handle Gringotts and the way that the goblins operate. It is brilliantly done. It is very highly detailed. Some of those external shots of Hogwarts, like when the boats are going across the lake and the camera pans up and you see the castle for the first time, it is absolutely breathtaking. I've even visited the Harry Potter studio tour in London. That really has sold just how detailed all these environments are. Like when you go into the Great Hall, on the walls there's a load of big highly detailed paintings on the back and front of each wall, and because the candles are so low in the movie you can barely see them, you never really get a proper close-up of them. Briefly you kind of see it, but when they're going down Diagon Alley there's like this a hairdresser's shop, and right above the door there's like a big pair of scissors, and it's actually moving but you don't really see it. Like the camera just sort of pans across it so fast that you can kind of see it moving a little bit but not much. It all does feel like it is still part of our world, but just beyond like a border that we can't quite see, and it is really well handled. It definitely feels very realistic. Kind of going off on a bit of a tangent here, but I'm somebody who does have the original DVDs that did come out when the movies were originally released, like the ones that fold out like a book. And one of the things that they had in the special features on the second discs was kind of like a tour where you could kind of go around the castle and then you can go off and try and find the stone. And one of the things that you have to do at the beginning is you have to go to Diagon Alley, and one of the things that you have to do is you have to press on the bricks on the wall to get through, and it's not the same as it is in the film. And it was so annoying because I basically had to rewatch the scene. But he presses those ones and he presses those ones, but that's not the ones that they are. It was so annoying, but honestly anyway, one of the reasons why it feels so real and grounded is because of the makeup that they've used and the costumes, because everything does feel very believable. The way that they've kind of crafted a lot of the creatures that they have, like the goblins, a lot of prosthetic and everything, they are very real. They're very well realised. Plus the integration of like a lot of animatronics and even like real animals like owls and bats and cats and all, so hey, right, all those kind of things. It really does lend itself to this actual real world, and it is absolutely brilliant. Even like how they bring Hagrid to life with the way that he's supposed to be like a half giant, the way that they've sort of made him as big as he is. I don't know if they use like a stunt double or anything. I know he was on stilts for a little bit of the time. They really like padded him out and he's wearing like prosthetic hands to make them look bigger. It works, it's very believable. And even though it's kind of a mixture of both like puppetry and effects, the way that they bring Voldemort to life in this movie is really clever, and it's quite freaky when you first see it, because it is so weird how it's made, because he's kind of like attached on the back of somebody's head, and it's done well. Even like on the detail work and like the ears, with the way that they're all sort of like twisted together, it really, honestly, it does look really good. Even like the way that when like his head's sort of moving a little bit and like the back sort of moving as well. I don't know if that was sort of added in post or whether that was genuinely how he was doing it, but it is brilliantly done. That being said, when it comes to the effects overall, a lot of the visual effects that they use, they're very 50-50. Some of them do hold up pretty well, and I do remember at the time some of them do look pretty good. But compared to other movies that were kind of coming out around the time, like Lord of the Rings and things like that, it doesn't look as great. There are definitely a few cartoony elements, like a lot of the creatures, that even though they are brought to life very well, like a lot of the movements and the way that they interact with their surroundings, really well done. They don't quite look right. There's something that's just off about them. Even the director Chris Columbus has said that he is not happy with how the effects were handled in the first film, to the point where he basically said that the second movie he wanted to basically focus on the filming really early on, get it all out of the way and done, and then spend as much time as possible trying to get the effects perfected. I definitely agree that that is the wisest decision to have had with this movie, because some of the effects really do not look good. Like during the Quidditch game, even though it is a very good sequence, it is very well handled, it is shot well, it is edited nicely, but when it comes to a lot of the effects that they've used, it is very CGI, and you can definitely tell it is. But the reason why I say it's 50-50 is because even though it might not look quite real enough, there is something that they do in this movie, and it kind of like incorporates a few practical elements as well, and it does sell it a bit more, and it does make it a bit more believable. Like when they are in the third floor corridor and they're interacting with Fluffy, and his paw is on the trap door, the way that like, the pushing his paw out the way, and it like sort of like drags along, and it's like catches the lock and everything. The way that all the effects do interact with the real world is very well handled, and that is why it's kind of 50-50 when it comes to the effects. They don't look great, but how they interact with things is. And it really does help that there are a lot of practical effects in this. Anything that could be done practically was. That's why makeup is such an important part in this. That's why animatronics was so important in this. They do sell it, and they do blur that line between what is fantasy and what is real. The music for this movie was composed by John Williams. Honestly, this is one of his iconic scores. Similarly to the tone of this movie, it's a lot lighter. There's a great sense of fun. It's very light-hearted, and it's got this sort of energy to it. Everything has its theme, especially like the Quidditch, and even like Halloween, with the way it sort of gets a little bit spooky here and there, and like when it gets to Christmas there's a bit of a jingle. It's a really good soundtrack. It honestly does fit this world very well. It suits the tone for this movie. I am glad that they do recycle it in Chamber of Secrets and onwards, but they do kind of filter back on it a little bit as the series goes forward, which does benefit those films. Even though it is a great soundtrack, it's not my favourite from John Williams, but it really is good for Harry Potter. It is definitely one of the most iconic soundtracks I can think of when it comes to a movie franchise. It really hits all the right notes. It manages to hit the right sort of tone for each sequence. I love how it does get a bit horrifying during like the forest sequence, or how it gets a bit more emotional during the mirror scene. It all works. It is a brilliant soundtrack, and I really love what John Williams was able to do with not only the main theme but the entire soundtrack as well. I did mention that this movie is 2.5 hours long, and to some people that might be a little bit lengthy, and I can kind of see why, but this does balance it very well. This does benefit from having a longer run time. As I said, this is definitely one of the more faithful adaptations in the franchise. There is actually a 3-hour cut of this movie that is available, and I believe that is the version that was released in America. And I have seen those sequences. I don't know if I've actually seen like the extended cut on its own, but I have seen the deleted scenes, and I am kind of amazed at some of the things they did remove, because they are things from the books. I really do like their additions, and I'm kind of amazed that they didn't actually do anything with them. They do kind of slow it down a little bit, but it doesn't really bother me. But when it comes to like the sequence where the owls are delivering the posts, like there's a really great sequence which is in the books where Aunt Petunia is trying to make some eggs, and she's picking up the shells and she like bashes them, but there's nothing coming out of them, and then she like opens it up, and then inside each of them is one of the Hogwarts letters. It's really imaginative, and it is brought to life so well. There are definitely things that have been removed or changed or tweaked in some way to make it a bit more like a film, like when Harry, Ron, Hermione accompanied by Draco and Hagrid, and they go into the Forbidden Forest. In the books it's actually Neville instead of Ron, but because the dragon sequence was like shortened down, like that's supposed to be something that takes a good chunk of time, that's more or less completely gone outside of like the introduction of Norbert the Dragon, but it makes more sense in the movie. It does shorten the length down a little bit more, it does kind of quicken the pace a bit more, and it does fit this, but in the long run I do feel like it doesn't benefit Neville's character, because he is one of the best characters in this franchise, and you need to see those elements in this. They do have a few of them in here, like when he stands up to Harry, Ron and Hermione, but that's really it. You need to see a bit more of that in order to sort of build up to where he needs to be. Also like how the path of the stone is all sort of laid out, and it is done well, it is adapted very well. I like how each area feels very different and unique, and it is something that each teacher has sort of worked on to try and help defend the Philosopher's Stone. But there are definitely a couple things that are missing here. I would have liked to have seen them, but again, they might have sort of extended things out a bit. The one that I am disappointed that they didn't include is the troll, because if you're sort of wondering where the troll comes from in the one that appears in the girls' bathroom earlier on in the movie, this is where he's come from. This is where he was meant to be, because he was meant to be one of the creatures that sort of defends the stone. He's the defense against the dark arts like lesson, and it's completely removed, so it doesn't really make sense why there's a troll running around the castle. That's why. And I really wish that they had included that in the film. Plus I would have also liked the potions game as well, where there's like 7 different bottles, one of them's wine, 2 of them are poison, one will send you back, one will send you forwards. I do quite enjoy that sequence, especially when I did read it in the book. I was like, I don't remember this in the film. It is a good sequence, it really shows how clever Hermione is. I like how each sequence does play up the strength of each character, and I am a little disappointed that it isn't included in here. It is on the DVD, it is actually a game on it, and it took me a few times to work out that no, it's that one you need to try. But yeah, I am a little conflicted on them not including it. Honestly, it's never really fazed me until I sort of did get into the books a bit more, but honestly it's fine. I do like how it is sort of shortened down, and it does quicken the pace, it does make it a bit easier to get through. Overall, I think this is a really great start to the franchise. It is a very well told story, some great characters, some great actors and performances. I love the music, the effects, the soundtrack. Everything about this movie works very well. There are definitely elements that could have been improved, some of the effects definitely could have been better, as well as a few of the performances here and there. But overall, this is a very heartwarming movie. This is the lightest of the franchise. I think this is something that adults and kids alike are going to really enjoy. There's some really good themes, and it really balances a lot of different tones in this movie. There's some really great life lessons introduced in this. I think this is a very good family movie, and I think that anyone who's a fan of fantasy, I'd recommend giving this a go. If you are somebody who does have kids, I think the kids will definitely enjoy this, but stick around and watch it yourself, because I think you will enjoy this. Just be careful showing your kids the future ones, because they can get a bit grown up. So with all that being said, I'm giving Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone an 8 out of 10. I really did enjoy revisiting this movie, and there's a lot of nostalgia for me. I didn't let nostalgia kind of like dominate how I saw this movie. I definitely sort of went in as clear-headed as possible. It is hard to do, especially with a movie that you really did grow up with, but I was able to kind of separate it enough. And honestly, this is still a great movie, and honestly, it is so worth a watch. Well, that's pretty much everything I've got to say for today's episode, so thank you so much for watching. Please like, please subscribe, hit the notification button to keep up to date on everything that's going on this channel. You can follow me on Facebook on rewindreviews.youtube, where I basically just keep like posting like little updates and thumbnails and things like that. Let me know down in the comments what you thought about the movie, whether you like it, where would you rank it when it comes to the other Harry Potter movies, what would you see in the mirror of Erised. Let me know down below. Also, if you have any suggestions for any future Rewind reviews you want me to do, whether it's film, TV, games, let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Rewind Reviews. Mischief managed.